Welcome to another episode of the Career Keynotes podcast with Tincup and Gardiner, where William and Andrew chop it up with respected Silicon Valley talent acquisition and HR leaders to get the real story behind their career journeys, along with an insider's view of how companies engage with candidates. Let's face it, these days, finding the job, much less nailing down an interview, is not easy. This is a rare opportunity to learn firsthand what companies are looking for in a candidate and the best ways to engage with them. And now, here are William and Andrew.
Okay, hello everybody and welcome back to this week's show. You know producer Bev, you know William. I am very excited about today's guest. I'm a huge fan and just a really bright guy, good guy, knows a lot about talent acquisition. And I'd like to welcome Steve Cadigan to the show. Hi, Steve.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Well, listen, I like to talk in hyperbole. So rather than me tell everybody how smart and fun and cool you are, would you mind just taking a couple of minutes and just give people a brief snapshot into who Steve Cadigan is?
Okay. Well, I guess on the professional side, Andrew, I stumbled into, by accident, the world of recruiting about 1 year out of school. I graduated with a history degree, had no clue how I was going to apply that. No one in my family tree on either side had much of a business background. We had a lot of people in nonprofits and education. So I didn't want to go that path necessarily. So I chose a company in San Francisco in the fashion world called The Spree that allowed me to rotate around. And after about a year, I rotated into human resources, and it was love at first sight. And what I found was everything I love about sports, and I'm a huge sports fan, and I probably spent more time, unfortunately, in the gym than the library through most of my college days. But what I love about sports is what I love about recruiting, which is putting that best team on the floor, trying to figure out which combination of leaders and talent can produce the most magic, who performs better in pressure, who'd rather have no pressure, who likes to work on their own, who likes to work in a big, loud environment. And so over the course of my career, I probably have never stayed at any company more than 6 years, but I went from a Spree in fashion after 4 years to Fireman's Fund Insurance Company, north of San Francisco in Marin, love Marin. And I was a generalist there. So I went from recruiter to generalist. And I went from sort of fashion shorts and t-shirts to three-piece suits and very formal, very organized. But for me, the great move in that jump was a team of 7 people doing everything to an HR team of about 300-400 people around the country with experts in fields like compensation and relocation and immigration and labor law. So I got sort of a buffet table of like, do I like this? Do I like that? Because as you know, the world of talent is so diverse, from recruiting and onboarding and coaching and development and immigration, relocation, benefits and perks and coaching and labor laws and on and on and on, and culture and so many other things. What you are really good at and what you like to do takes a while to sort of settle in. And I got a chance to get a sense when I was at Fireman's Fund, I kind of like this HR stuff, but I still had never met someone who's running HR that I was like, I want to be like that person. So probably after about 4 years at Fireman's Fund, I got an opportunity to go to Silicon Valley. And then it was like real love at first sight, because Silicon Valley companies in the tech space, generally speaking, are much more open to experimentation and trying new things. And let's try this org designer, let's try this incentive planner, let's try this kind of cultural intervention, and because that's what technology is about. It's about trying new things, and that permeates into org strategies. And so I was like, whoa, I didn't even know we could try stuff like that. Like when I was at Fireman's Fund, we would have a meeting to decide who should come to the meeting. And then when I went to AMD, which is the first tech company I played at in the semiconductor space, we would have call a meeting when we pass each other in the hall, we'd make a decision, and then we'd walk back to our cubicles. I mean, that immediacy of impact was really an adrenaline rush for me. And so I'm around, approaching my 30th birthday, and I finally go, I want to do this for the rest of my life. Like, I love this. I'm all in. And I went and got a master's degree at University of San Francisco. I switched companies in the middle of that degree, and I went from AMD to Cisco. And I jokingly say on my LinkedIn profile that every paper I wrote for that degree was in the coach class of some airplane, hunched over one of the early model laptops, which was like 500 pounds. And then someone would recline their seat in front of me, and it hit me in the forehead. But I really, went all in at that point and said, for the first time in my life, I was going to school with a purpose. I went to high school and college undergrad because that's what you do. I didn't really have much motivation, direction, incentive. And then when I went to get my master's, I was hungry, thirsty. I knew what I wanted, and I really wanted to pull everything out of that. And so the job at Cisco was really interesting and different for me in terms of my HR arc, because I did M&A work for 4 years, which is very different when you think about recruiting and generalist work. M&A work in the HR domain has a beginning, middle, end. We announced we're going to do diligence. We're going to buy the company. We need to integrate them in. We connect them to all our systems, tools, resources, comp and ben plans, job family matrices, and then we're out. And then the ongoing HR team takes over. So, and I love that change. I mean, I did my first business trip of my life there when I was like mid-30s now. Hey, business trip, woo! So got to travel to all kinds of corners of the earth. And what was really cool, and this is a whole nother story we could talk about some other time, there's nothing in my background I felt that qualified me to do mergers and acquisitions work. And somehow I had a boss who never graduated from college, who saw something in me and said, no, you're a little bit crazy, and you're a little bit of a rebel. So this is a high transition, high change environment. We'll give you a shot at doing that. So I did that for 4 years, 50 acquisitions. 1 year we did 26, and we had 13 at the same time. And I built that team from nothing to a team that was recognized in the Wall Street Journal and Fortune magazine as one of the best in the world. And that was a big sort of feather in my cap early in my career. So super proud of that. You guys may have read in 2001, the dot-com bubble burst. So poof, my job went away, and as did 8,000 other jobs at Cisco. And rather than leave the company, they offered to move me to Asia to run human resources for Cisco Asia, which I did for 2 years. And I had a remit of about 3,000 employees from South Korea all the way down to New Zealand. And that was an incredible adventure for me. Like, I moved to Singapore, and honestly, I'm embarrassed to say, I didn't know that Singapore wasn't a region of China. I didn't know it was its own country until I went over there. And it was just an incredible learning experience. Everything you smell, taste, communicate. And as, Andrew, I've known you for a while. And one of the skills that you have is one that I think I have a little bit, which is reading body language. Well, good luck with that in Asia. Doesn't mean a whole lot. Also, good luck understanding that when you're in Singapore and you say someone's Asian, to them, that doesn't include the Chinese. The Chinese are distinct from Asians, and Asians, for us as Westerners, Indians are not included. If you're from India, you're from India. But no, in Singapore, if you're Asian, you could be in India too. So anyway, just countless of learnings like that. And I stepped on my tongue and, made a bunch of silly mistakes, but learned a lot to respect a lot of the unknown over there. So did that for 2 years. At the end of that, I was pretty tired of some of the political scene in HR at Cisco. A lot of GE HR people were coming in, and it wasn't working for me. So I took an opportunity to leave and went and did my first head of HR gig in Canada, in Western Canada. So I did sort of the triangle of, California, Singapore, and then back to North America, but this time in Canada. Was head of HR for a wonderful chip company there. Again, that was US listed, but it was Canadian populated for the most part. And it was a tough time post.com. We were laying people off, trimming, trying to do more with less. And I think sadly, I've probably let more people go in my career in HR than I have hired, but there's still time. And hopefully post-COVID, I can add some more to my list of hires. But after doing that for 4 years, I was approached by Electronic Arts in the video game industry, and it was a real sexy opportunity. And I'm a gamer, I'm a hacker, and I was kind of ready to come back to the U.S. And they offered me a wonderful opportunity. So I came back to the States, not as the head of HR at Electronic Arts, but sort of the number two, but also was primarily hired by the CEO, John Riccitiello, who was new to EA, and he wanted an aggressive M&A strategy. So I was going to be a generalist for a division of the business, but also do M&A. And what Riccatello wanted to do, and I've done a couple of TikToks about this, which was really, really cool, was in the interview with Riccatello, I said, so what are your plans, John? You're the new CEO. Like, what do you got going? He's like, oh, I'm here to change the culture. And I says, yeah, I've done some research and I realized that every field office in Electronic Arts is an acquisition. So that's really interesting to me. Like every studio used to be an independent company, and now you're creating value with this. And he goes, yeah, this, what he called it, a loose faction of warring tribes is what he called the studios. So he said, none of them wanted to play nice with each other. And think about it. If you're trying to get independent companies to help each other out, what you're telling them in a way is, I'm going to lose control because someone else is controlling my resources. Then I can't control meeting my deadlines, not in my best interests. So he had inertia, cultural inertia to prevent his plan from like, hey, we got to get more leverage here. Let's share the creative sound team between all the studios, or share the software that you make games on. And he was really having a hard time. So I said, John, so how can I help you? Like, what are we going to do to change the culture? And he goes, I'll never forget this line. It's one of my favorite lines from an executive. He goes, Steve, let me ask you a question. How do you change the shape of a diamond? And I go, a diamond. I go, I don't know. He goes, you got to hit it really effing hard. And I'm like, oh, so that's going to be your organization change strategy? Just pound away. But it was just, I love working for John, and he is such a character. He's CEO of Unity right now, just super charismatic and fun. Unfortunately, a few days after I joined Electronic Arts, the second mortgage crisis hit, 2008. Boom, we had all this intentions of buying these companies. We had no ability to get board support or investor support to buy anything. And we were right in the middle of a hostile takeover of Take-Two Interactive. And they're a very edgy kind of game company. They make that sort of edgy game called GTA, Grand Theft Auto. Andrew, I know you have young boys, and I know you've probably heard that sound in the background, screeching tires and gunshots. So we had to pull out, and that was going to be one of the most interesting deals of my merger and acquisition life. Hostile takeover, and we had to try to take over the board and everything. But anyway, it fell apart. It's a good thing that it did, because it probably wasn't a good deal for the company in the long run. So anyway, here I am back in the United States. I had 3 kids when I was overseas, so they're closer to their grandparents now. This is really great. And it turns out I really didn't fit with that culture, Electronic Arts, as much as I thought I was kind of a hip gamer. They were much more, let's say, and it best captured in another great quote from my first days at Electronic Arts from my boss, Gabrielle Toledano, who later became the head of HR for Tesla. She was head of HR for a bunch of other organizations, but just wonderful person. I think she's head of HR for, who is it? Is it ServiceNow? Yeah, I think she's over at ServiceNow. Mm-hmm. Anyway, she picks me up for my first day on the job at new hire orientation. She says, hey, I need to give you some helpful advice to help you be successful here. I said, oh, great, Gabby, love it. She said, Steve, decisions here are governed more by drama than data. And I go, oh, okay, well, it's an entertainment company. Of course, it's going to be drama. I'm good with drama. I can handle drama. I acted in high school plays. I'm good with that. Well, what she really meant was, if a studio leader didn't like a decision, they would kick and scream and cry and fight and threaten to quit and take their team to another studio unless you gave them more money. And guess what EA did? Gave them more money. Yeah. So they're like, hey, I don't really believe in negotiating with terrorists. So this doesn't really work for me. This is not how we're going to change. You're just basically saying, if you threaten to quit, that's your leverage. So I didn't like that. And around that time, LinkedIn came knocking on my door to be their first head of human resources. This is 2009. I talk about this. I'm in the middle of finishing a book, which hopefully is going to come out the end of Q2. But the whole genesis of that book is how I found out that I was going to get the job offer, and how Gabby, my boss at EA, found out I was interviewing there before I had the job offer. And she's like, I know you're interviewing. I'm like, oh my gosh, how did you find out? And she found out because I connected. When I interviewed at LinkedIn, I connected with all the executives. And back then, when you connect with somebody, it would send a broadcast note to your whole network. And so Gabrielle opened up her LinkedIn that morning. It's like, Steve is now connected to the head of sales, head of engineering, head of production, the general counsel, the CFO, the CEO, the chairman. Oh, maybe he wasn't off at that dentist appointment yesterday like I thought he was. Right?
Oh,
So
dude, I love
that and what about that experience was so interesting, having her find out that I was leaving, and I did get the job offer, and I was like, oh my gosh, if I don't get this job, I'm so dead here. I'm going to be dead man walking. I got the job, but she was made to feel really badly that I left after only being there about a year and a half. I was feeling guilty for leaving early, but I was accepting the job opportunity of a lifetime. And that should have been a celebratory moment because EA couldn't help me at that company be a head of HR for a pre-IPO company. But anyway, I took the opportunity, Andrew, and I was there at LinkedIn for 4 amazing, massive years of growth. 6-year-old company with 400 people. Over the about 4 years that I was there, we grew to 4,000. We went from 2 countries to 17 and from 3 offices to 26. And it was one of the most terrifying, exciting 4 years of my life. And I never built an HR team from nothing. And that was the big lesson where like, what could be hard about this job? I've seen every mistake in the book. I've been at all these big companies. Yeah, Steve, but you'd never build HR from nothing. And so imagine walking in the door. There's no performance management philosophy. There's no comp strategy. There's no philosophy on how many levels we want. Do we want, employee, manager, director? Do you want employee, senior employee, assistant manager, manager, senior manager? Like, what do we want to do? So everything was soft. It wasn't clay. It was like Jello. I couldn't even grasp some of this stuff. And I had a bunch of fellow executives at LinkedIn who were big company refugees. And what I'm about to say, I think will resonate with the audience a lot who are in the talent community in one capacity or another. What came really clear to me in my early days at LinkedIn is that most leaders know more what they don't want from TA and HR than what they do want. They've seen more failure, they've seen more disappointment than they have real successes. So they don't know how to leverage the function. They don't know what great looks like because they've been so few examples, or because management sometimes doesn't have a strong spine. HR has had to stand up and speak for management, and they're behind the scenes, and HR takes the hit for what management is incapable, immature enough to own. So, but it's just an interesting place. So I was at LinkedIn for 4 years. I was, incredibly proud of the work that I did building a culture, which I think is to this day is one of the best, highest performing cultures in hypergrowth, how you realize success out of crazy. And I left, I was super tired, and I had an opportunity to just sort of take a breath. And my kids, I was the only executive at LinkedIn that had 3 small kids, the only one. Jeff Weiner, the CEO, had 2, and he probably had 7 nannies. So, it wasn't really fair to compare my parenting to his. He deserved it because he's a super talented guy. But, and I'm joking, he didn't have 7 nannies, but it felt like it, And so I decided to take a break and do something different. And over the last 8, 9, 10 years, and that's kind of when you and I started crossing paths, I distilled, where's my place in the world, and then sort of settled on helping individuals, leaders, and organizations build great talent strategies. Like, that's what I love to do. And that includes speaking and teaching and workshops. And last year, it's like, Mr. Webinar, you need a green screen, I got a green screen. You need 4K video, got your 4K video. Like, I had to pivot from going to these conferences to become sort of a producer here. And it's been, just like everything, I get more excited when I got to learn new stuff and I don't know it. And this last year has been chock filled with that. But I have the great pleasure today of being on speed dial from some of the best VCs in the Valley, like Andreessen, Greylock. They'll call me and say, we got a portfolio company, Sequoia. Hey, can you go talk to them? And I'll do that. So I'm sort of like the MacGyver for them sometimes when they hit a wall. I have some of the best companies in the world. Like, this year was a really cool year for me in that McKinsey Consulting called me to be a speaker at their future work seminar. Like, that's the company that everyone's like, oh yeah, they're the ones that like, they called me in. So that was I would tell my wife, like, hey, McKinsey's calling, they want the kid. So it was pretty cool to be able to, start to realize a platform to be able to help people navigate which, and I was writing this book in the future of work all pre-COVID. And then COVID hits. I'm like, oh my God, my book's going to be worthless
Yeah,
because
right.
now the future of work's going to be 180 degrees. Well, it turns out I was wrong, and that a lot of the tenets of my book are on agility, adaptability, rapid change, were more important post-COVID, during COVID, than they were pre-COVID. So I've been sort of woke up one day after a few sleepless nights and said, no, I think I can land this. So anyway, I'm going on way too long here, but that's a bit of the story of how I sort of got to where I am today.
I almost want you to bow. I mean, that was an amazing biopic and completely true. And there's just, God, I don't even know where to start. I think one of the things I admire most about you, Steve, is, and you already alluded to it, is you care, and you obviously validated the thing that, hey, when I grow up, I'm going to be an HR leader. No, the history major and then you got a taste of it and organizational development, and then you went all in. One of the things I really enjoy about you, and I did meet you, you were a panelist or a speaker at an event I attended, and I just said, I got to know this guy. This guy's a wizard. You are the MacGyver, and all that stuff's true, audience, all of it. He's probably understating it. But one of the questions I have, and I have a lot of them, but the first one that comes to mind is, you're one of the few people that you have a strong TA bent. Clearly, hiring is in your DNA, to your point, and yet you are able to navigate the transition to running HR. Looking back, was that easy? Was it hard? Was it natural? What were some of the gotchas or some of the wins that probably wouldn't register for the layperson?
Well, as you know, and I'm sure a lot of folks in the audience know, and I definitely know from reading a lot of William's posts that he gets, is that there are many different dimensions of recruiting, and recruiting looks different and takes different forms in different industries. When someone says an employee to me, because I'm in Silicon Valley so long, for example, I think of a software engineer. That's when I think of an employee, that's what I think of. But I've worked with a lot of temporary placement agencies. Now we have gig workers, but that transition for me was like super easy, because if you really want to do pure recruiting, you look at it from what I call the long game, which is, I don't care about you to fill this job. I care about you for the long term of your career. And if I'm interviewing you and I don't think this job is right for you, I'm going to let you know, versus get the win by filling it. But in the back of my mind, I know you've got a shelf life of about 9 months. You're going to hate this boss. You're going to hate this company. You're going to run screaming. And so I really believe that, because I do care, like if something is broken in a system, and we've had many conversations on this, Andrew, but if something's wrong in the system, broken in a system, I have an allergic reaction. I don't want to be a part of it. I can't handle it. Like, let's fix what the real problem is. So, for example, one of
Please.
the core dimensions in an organization when they come to recruiting philosophy is, okay, executive, who owns the search? Hiring manager or recruiter? I mean, if I'm looking to go somewhere, the answer for me better be hiring manager. It better be recruiter is the kerosene that's going to go on the fire to make this thing turbo boost, or to put it in the engine and really make it fly, and to make the manager better at doing their job. Because the candidate's not working for me, candidate's working for them. So that's a big piece. And so when I look at recruiting, the pivot for me was probably easier than it might be for others who are just looking to check a box, because I want a sustainable organization that will benefit from a long-term fit here. Or if it's a 3 or 4 year assignment and it's a contract, I want to make sure it's going to be rich for both people. And I had a recruiter that touched my life one time at AMD. His name was Skip Franks. And Skip was all recruiting all the time. And after he hired me, he had coffee with me once a month. How's it going with your boss? You liking what you're doing? Anything I could do to help you? And he stood behind every commitment that he made to me. And that really is like, wow, I'd never seen recruiting be like that, And so I respected the function even more. And he's of the family of the Paul Mack and the Rob Lakes and some folks that have touched many, many recruiting lives, like really done it well. There's a lot of great people out there from the AMD family that really showed me how it could be done in a way that's like amazing. And you get to new grad recruiting as well. But I think if you're doing your job well as a recruiter, you really are trying to understand what's the company, what's the division, what's the sensibility of the manager, what's the team dynamics. And that helps you learn when you pivot to more of a generalist, that all the many levers that exist in an organization. So
So,
I think it was okay for me because of that. Yeah.
Clearly.
so Steve, I want to ask a question for you to look back at your own career and think about people that hired you. Do you, again, between the polarities of competence or competence and potential, do you think that people hired you based on your potential, or do you think that they hired you based on your competence? And then as you answer that question, I want to get your take on those two things. Do you believe in hiring based on one or the other? And not, I know the answer is both. I get it, but I'm going to ask
Yeah.
you to kind of stick to
Well,
one side or the other.
it's a great question, William, and there is no right answer on this one.
Right.
And like this is why I love the art form and the science of talent, because there is no right culture, there is no right leadership style. There's so many different dimensions that fit. That's why when we see all this Silicon Valley tourism, like, oh yeah, let's go to Google, let's do what they do. Well, you're not Google, you're not Larry Page and Sergey Brin, you're not in that industry. It may not work for you. So when I think about it, I definitely have evolved my thinking on this one. And when when I started, I was much more experiential, prove to me you've done it, competence based. I have definitely shifted that a lot over, especially the last 15 years, to, I don't necessarily call it potential, what I refer to it as learning velocity.
Oh, cool.
Can you demonstrate to me that you can learn new stuff? Because, and again, I was joking around with someone today. I said, do you know what the shelf life of a job description is today of being real, having value? It's about 3 weeks. So what that means is we need people who can change as the job changes, because job requirements are changing, business needs change faster than ever before. And so having made a few bets. So I had one manager, Mimi Jagu, bless her heart, she passed away a few years ago. And she was a person that hired me at Cisco, never went to college. And she taught me a lesson that is tied to what you're getting at, William, which is hire people better than you. And we had this one, we were trying to hire someone who spoke Mandarin because a lot of our deals had sales staff in China. And we didn't have anyone that was in HR that spoke Mandarin, and we didn't want to hire anyone in China. So let's get someone. So found this guy, ex-military, airborne ranger, self-taught Mandarin, worked for Bacardi in Asia. And he wanted to do M&A work at Cisco. And I interviewed the guy, and I was like, I don't know, I had a little bit of an edge. I don't see him fitting, really intimidated by the guy, honestly. And so she says, well, I think you better hire him, Steve. And I was like, well, whose choice is it? She goes, it's your choice. But I really think, and I was like, but Mimi, he's got all these skills and, he's really good. I started to play the, are you sure he's going to stick around because he's so good card, even though I didn't really believe it. And so she really pushed me and finally got me to agree to make him the job offer. He's one of my best friends to this day. And what I learned from hiring people who are better than you and things you're not good at is it lets you do the things you're great at even greater, and you can share the things you don't know very well with someone who wants to learn from you. But it is a kind of a check the ego moment for me, and that was okay, wow, he checked a lot of boxes, but I'm kind of a little intimidated. And how is this going to work? Is he going to be like aiming for my job? And so, and having that moment and being able to work past that, I'm a big believer in taking bets on people who can make you better. But also, if they don't have the requirements that you're looking for, if they've been able to demonstrate they can do it in other places, learn new things, self-taught Mandarin, are you kidding me? Out of the Army, unbelievable. And so, guess where he is today? He's like a roaming HR executive over at Google now. Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. Super cool. Yeah.
So Steve, you covered a lot of ground, but one of the things, and I know this about you as a friend and just someone that's spent a fair amount of time with you, is your willingness to put up your hand and say, "Hey, I don't know everything. Like I don't have it all figured out, but you know what? I'm keen to," you said, I forget, but I loved it. It's like, what's more important, what you know or what you don't know? And you're a big what I don't know, because everything I know I learned, but I want to learn more, and I know I don't know everything, and that's very powerful. And on top of that, and I do have a question, your willingness to go over the middle without your helmet on, without your chin strap on, and take risks and take chances. And the expression that comes to mind is you got to break a few eggs if you want to make an omelet. But
Mhm.
you did a lot of forward thinking. I'm going to say risky, but stuff that wasn't tried and true, and you were making it up as you were going along. And obviously you cared, and that helps, and you're very bright, and that helps. But as you look back over the trajectory of some of the things that you did, some of the initiatives, some of the challenges, pain points, what are one or two anecdotally things that you did that were the hardest, that maybe you learned the most, or that were the most successful, or that you think had the biggest impact, either for you or for TA or HR as a whole?
Sure. Let's step back. I had a mentor of mine, John Radford, who's like a pillar of the compensation world
Right.
here. I had him come talk to my LinkedIn HR team in the early days, and he said something that sticks with me today. He told my team, if you haven't had a setback in your career, you haven't had a career. And so, I think I'm able to bring some deep empathy and sensibility into my world because I have a brother who's disabled, who had to drop out of school because he had some deep paranoia and some, diagnosed with schizophrenia. I had, like a lot of folks, it was a broken home, but I was 15 and my parents' divorce, it wasn't ugly, but it messed me up. I wish it was ugly because I could have said, wow, this is really bad. But they were so nice and kind. Oh, yeah, holding hands, we're getting divorced. I'm like, oh, my parents are so cool. And years later, I kind of almost had like a little bit of a breakdown. I had a moment in my life where I found out I was going to be a father my senior year in college, and I wasn't ready to be a father. And I became a dad and spent every other weekend of my 20s running up to Chico to take my son for the weekend from his mom, who was up there living off of welfare. And my first paycheck was 50% wage garnishment because she was on welfare. So I've had some real life moments that make me appreciate the wholeness of people. And I think in a world where we see rising cases of anxiety and depression, having a brother and being close to NAMI, which is a National Association of Mental Illness, and trying to help other families, facing those kinds of circumstances, I see, I see and accept a wide range of what some people might consider normal, if you will. Right? And so that served me well. Getting to a taste to go to Asia and be very humbled and have my skill of reading body language worth nothing. That was very disarming. I could read people, like my parents didn't talk a lot, so I became really good at kind of like, what are they really saying? Because they're not saying anything. Really good, right? Beverly's raising her hand like, yeah, been there, seen that. So some of those, what do they call, like codependent origins that we come from, leave us with these skills. My older sister has incredible gifts reading people with no words. And so, a lot of those things I think really help. When it comes to TA, the story I just told William around my friend also named Steve at Cisco, hiring people better, like, whoa, that's huge, and I also think that those moments where, as an HR leader, like the biggest leap you can make in the world, I believe, of human resources more generally is when you learn that the legal advice is just that, legal advice. It's not a requirement to have to do what the lawyer says, but you know enough and have enough confidence and intellectual horsepower to say, I'm going to take that under advisement, and now it's my job to take a risk. Let the audience in on a little secret here. If every company followed every legal requirement to the letter of the law, they would go bankrupt. But what a lot of laws say is we need to know you're making a good faith effort. Now, I'm not saying that to say, hey, skirt corners, cut corners, and
Right.
no. What I'm saying is we're in the judgment business. And if we followed every single rule, and our former president is a great example of, okay, thanks for the rules, I'm going to do it my way and come get me if you want to, we have to make judgment calls that sometimes feel awkward. And that's part of your maturity curve, right? And a recruiter who can push back on a hiring manager and say, listen, I've given you 17 candidates. You said no to every one. Like, I didn't see Jesus's name in the job description. Like, what are we looking for here? Like, we have to be able to say, you told me this, I delivered that. I keep delivering what you said. Maybe what you really want is not what you really told me. So let's reset, And so I've had a number of those situations where we get those opportunities. And, don't get me wrong. Like, I may sound like I know what I'm talking about. I have made so many mistakes. And I think what I've built a career around is trying to build trust. And this is the thing that a lot of people, I wish someone had told me this early in my career, that HR is really about two things: credibility and judgment. And if you have no judgment, you're not going to build credibility. And if you have no credibility, no one cares about your judgment. So, and that, what I look for, and this is why I was having a conversation today with this really great organization in London. It's a food company. And I said, let's be honest here. This overplayed phrase we've heard, like, never let a good crisis go to waste.
Right.
It is true that this is the best time for you as a leader to show what you're made of. In human resources, when you're new, the best time to show everyone like what you're made of is when something bad happens. What are you going to do? So, for example, I had my first week at LinkedIn. Someone could probably reverse engineer and figure out who I'm talking about here, but a member of the senior staff, their direct reports, barrage me. We got a problem. We don't like our boss, blah, 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 steps on us, tells us to go left, but they really say go right. They take things from us and we can't finish it. Very frustrated. So I'm like, wow, there must be a problem here. So I go to the CEO, my boss, asterisk, first time he's ever been a CEO. He and I have not developed, shorthand language yet. We haven't even built a contract yet. I go into him one day for my one-on-one. This is like a few days later. Say, hey, I'm getting all these complaints over here. Is something going on over there that I should know about? You're just looking for a little inside information. 3 hours later, guess who comes running in my office? The executive whose the employees are complaining about. And they say to me, hey, the CEO says you got a problem with me. And I'm like, oh boy, dial it back. I screwed up because I didn't tell the CEO, well, I'm having a in the dome of silence conversation with you here. Like, I just need to if I need your help to go out. But he was such a perfectionist that any sort of thing that I told him like that was like a pea in his mattress. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't hold on to it for a second. He says, get in here. What's going on? Why are all your people complaining at HR? And so that person's like, HR just outed me. So I just had a massive, default of my credibility with that executive. Right? They think I'm going to rat him out. And that wasn't what I was intending to do. I wanted to collaborate and just bounce something because I'm the new guy, And by the way, when you're new in HR, the people that are most unhappy will find you fast, And so it's really interesting. So it took me weeks to repair that, maybe months. I thought it was weeks, but I had to go first repair my contract relationship with Jeff Cleaner and say, this is not how we work. And second, I had to sort of earn over time through various situations, am I going to run to paddle or not? And I had to earn that trust back. But that was here I am, sort of in the twilight of my HR career. And that was a big miss for me, big miss. And it messed my relationship. And you don't think that executive is going to tell the other executives? Yeah. So now I'm in a hole, right? And that's sort of credibility, judgment. It's all about that and having the contract. And you have so much power in HR, like so much power. And I've seen it too many times wielded really politically, and that's a shame, And that's a real shame because every promotion, every hire, we want salary targets, so many things that touch the culture and the political implications of an organization run through your desk in HR. And that's why a lot of people don't like HR, because sometimes they don't like the answer. And it's an impossible role too. I love it, but it's also impossible. One day you're coaching the executive, and the next day you're saying, hey, we've had a complaint of sexual harassment. We're going to have to investigate you. And they're like, what? Or they come and say, I want to promote Jim. And you say, no, you're not, because Susie and Sarah are more qualified. And if you promote Jim, I got a cultural crisis on my hands, and I'm not going to let you do that. Are you going to block me, Cadigan? Is that what you're going to do? Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. That's exactly what I'm going to do. And so, I mean, I could tell you story after story after story, but that's how it goes. And that's, people don't appreciate that. So then that manager you say no to, you're doing the right thing, but they're not happy about it, and hopefully they'll get mature, right? That's why I want to work for someone who's got my back, who sees HR way more in front of me. And that's what, if you're looking for, hey, what organization can I do great work in? Well, it's one with the senior leadership team co-owns the talent strategy with you. That's sort of where I'm arrived after many years.
I love it. You mentioned hacking earlier, and so it got my brain thinking about through your career, and probably right now you've probably got a black book of hacks for HR and TA. You probably, not to go through all of them, but what are some of your favorite hacks of either HR or TA?
Oh gosh, there's a number of them. So I have another. This is part of the hack book, but one of the shortcuts is when you're organizing a candidate to come in to interview, whether it's on Zoom or come in the building, if that process is complicated and difficult with that candidate, 90% of the time they're going to be a difficult employee all the time. So there's pattern recognition that you learn over time, like that. That's sort of one. If a manager comes and says our salary ranges are just a bunch of, I can't recruit with this salary ranges, when they've hardly invested any time trying to close a candidate. So what they're really saying is they don't know how to sell. They don't know, they need more money because they're incapable of selling. And so that's sort of a flag, a flag to me. Another one is sales comes to you and says, hey, we're going to have our offsite in Vegas this year, our sales kickoff. Immediately in HR, the transition is, well, I'll be firing somebody on Monday because there's no way, no way
Christmas party,
sales and alcohol in Vegas is a good combination. No. Never
and
ends well. I guarantee you. Yeah. And so, and this is why, we could go on, but one of the sad moments for me at LinkedIn came when we had an internship program for HR aspiring talent. And we went to some of the best schools around, and we found this woman from Stanford GSB who wanted to be an HR intern. And we're like, are you sure? Like, HR intern? Like, are you getting teased among your peers over at GSB, like HR? And she's like, oh yeah, I love it. And I'm like, great. So at the end of her assignment, we gave her 2 job opportunity offers: talent analytics or the HR generalist path. And she's like, didn't even blink. Yep, I want to do talent analytics. Well, why is that? Because I'm going to get an audience with the CEO to show the data. I was like, true, very true. And that is the future of HR, is understanding these analytics. So that could be a very bright path. However, that's not the shortcut to becoming the head of HR. If that's what you want to be, you're going to have to go earn your stripes and do some dirty work in the generalist community. She's like, yeah, I've seen what they do. Not interested. And all of a sudden it hit me. It's like, this is why great talent doesn't necessarily want to come in, because the skill that I build is, and I'll give you another story, is pattern recognition. So I'm sitting in the boardroom at LinkedIn, and we have 2 members of our board from Netflix. Netflix could not be brighter in terms of being more clear about who they are and what they're about. We hire the best, we pay you the best, and if you're not the best, you're not going to be here very, very long. And they're very extreme. So at one point when we were hiring, doubling our population, first year 400, 1,000, next year 1,000, 2,000, like, we'd like to start seeing numbers on how many people you're firing who are poor performers. And I'm thinking, And then it went to, we need a bottom 5, every quarter out plan. And I said, really? And my CEO is kind of looking at his shoes right now, not really helping me. I said, well, let me tell you something. I've been at Cisco, and we had that when the GE people invaded. And let me tell you how it plays out. We have not invested any time in developing our managers to have hard conversations. We spent all our time recruiting and building this company. I'm happy to invest in that. But if you want to do that now, I'm presenting a horror show to my leaders. It's going to distract them from doing the recruiting. And so I would rather measure our ability to move people out who aren't working voluntarily so they get another job, I don't pay severance, than just be measured on how I terminate and do a bottom 5 rating and ranking. So I was so animated about that because I saw how it almost wrecked Cisco, that I finally got the CEO. He was like, yeah. He was like, I got Jeff so pumped up. He's like, we're going to go tell those poor people. I was like, okay, great. And so I seen the pattern recognition that I was ready to put the Wonder Woman bands and go, boom, boom, we're not doing that. We are not doing that. And then I had to tell Jeff, I said, They're both from Netflix. I said, have you ever been in the Netflix building, Jeff? Have you ever been around that culture?
I have.
Because, you know, if you buy into it, it's what you like, great. But there's a little bit of like, I might get shot. There's a little bit of like a, sniper fire might come in if I don't meet my numbers. Is that what we want here? Is that how we're going to get people to do their best work? I'm not sure. And he's like, oh yeah, we definitely don't want that culture. So I was like, and I'm not, no disrespect to Netflix. I mean, who's going to argue with that business? I wish when their stock tumbled from 300 to 80 that I doubled down. And it's probably doubled again a few times, but this is about your sensibility of learning your, whether it's a hack or a sort of a shortcut, but the pattern recognition, taking time, and doesn't always feel good. It's uncomfortable for whatever reason. Like I like crazy a little bit. It kind of excites me. And I stay calm for the most part in some of those situations.
You are good in crisis, brother. You are very good in crisis.
I've had my fair share, I guess, so yeah.
I have a bunch more questions, but before, and we have to pivot soon. I knew this was going to go well. We might have to have you back. Producer Bev, you have been awfully quiet because I've been talking though. I'm sure, do you have a question for Steve? Is there something you'd like to ask him?
Yes. First, you used one of my favorite phrases, intellectual horsepower. I love that. And you started in retail. You got a firsthand glimpse of how boot campy retail recruiting and HR is. So as a forward-thinking strategic guy, what do you think has to happen with retail, minimum wage, big box style hiring to make the difference? Because when you all talk about hiring strategies with engineers and blah, blah, it seems like an exotic other country from the background I've come from. So I'm just wondering what you envision would have to happen to make some of this cool stuff show up there.
Wow, you
and I'm
really,
gonna
ask
you
Mr.
really hit me
Wizard
hard with that one, Beverly. Wow.
Let's ask Kazoo.
And my dog's barking.
The thing that I love about recruiting in retail is you can see and touch and feel the product. You know what it is. When you're in tech, it's ethereal. Ooh. It's sort of really hard to feel it and touch it, and you can see how you can impact people's lives and style and things. It can be a really cool thing. And I miss those days when I went into technology. Like I knew what the product, I could relate to it. Like I don't care about a semiconductor. I care about the leadership strategy and the culture and the people, but I don't get excited about, integrated circuits and 3D print. It doesn't get me excited. And so, when I think about your question, I mean, that is that community has a strength and a lever to be able to attract people that they need to take advantage of. People can relate to this. I see it, I touch it, I feel it, right? And that's why we have so many problems in the world, because hey, there's a hole in the ocean, can't see it. I'm not sure there's a problem there, Really, plastic in the ocean, hadn't seen any when I was out there cruising on the Disney cruise line. I don't know, is it really a problem? And so I think there's real advantage there. I think what is interesting to me right now, it's sort of tangential to what you're talking about, Beverly, which is Proposition 22, which just passed in San Francisco, the new hybrid worker, not full-time, not a contractor, sort of in the middle, which to me is sort of, helping those gig companies skirt having to pay more than probably they should, because we have a messed up healthcare system in this country that's overly costly in the wrong places. We're seeing new forms of classification that are going to be taking shape as new kinds of work happens. And what I think about in the next few months in front of us, what it's going to be really interesting is we've all tasted a new reality for a year, and it's probably going to be a year and a half to 2 years. We've all tasted something different, working in different ways, communicating different ways, not commuting, maybe we were commuting, or if we're a frontline worker, we're like, I'm not sure I want to do this anymore. And I think it's going to reframe what I call sort of like your mental value set, your hierarchical value set of what's important to you. Like I love working from home. I've done it for 8 years, but I don't love being the short order cook for my kids saying, hey, what are you going to get off this Zoom call? Make me freaking lunch. I came in here and they're like, how long are you going to be on that thing? It's like, I want to start gaming soon, Dad, or what's for dinner? I'm like, whoa. Well, how come you're not at school? Oh yeah, because we don't have you in school. But the domain of recruiting, I think, is going to be really interesting in the years ahead, because everyone's vertical alignment of what's important to them is shifted. And the longer we do this, and that's a cool thing. There's nothing bad with that. But, I worried, how are we going to close candidates? And we're going to have more people in companies that have never been in person with any of their colleagues the longer we do this. And recruiting's always been distant, except for the last mile, bring you in, meet the team.
Yeah, right.
Now we've had to do the last mile all remote. That's interesting to me. Like, how's this going to play over a period of time, right? And intellectually, I think we can do it. But can we really pull that off over time? Can we really innovate with people we never really met in person? Do I really trust that person? I don't know. Those are the kinds of things that really get me very curious.
Okay, look, I got to ask it. We got to pivot soon and get to the candidate side, but now you guys, audience, you see why I wanted Steve on the show, guys, a font of information. And I want to call out something you said earlier. And this is we're trying to figure out a way to earmark let's say when everyone leans in, the pearl wisdom. But what you said is, and I'm going to say it differently. You said, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, and you care. And so that served you really well. And insofar as you're willing to take a bullet for the team, for the greater common good, and that has equally served you well. You will, stand up for what's right or what's best, even though you're in the minority, and even if you run the risk of going against the grain. And I think in large part, that's why you've been so successful and had such a positive impact on HR and TA in general. So all that aside, I'd like you to just give us, as be as succinct as you want. What's wrong with the way, you can talk about the COVID thing and that impact. You can't, it's going to be hard to not address that. But I love William's magic wand. If I gave Steve Cadigan a magic wand, I said, okay, Steve, and you're great at prognosticating too, by the way. So hurry up with the book and get it out so people can figure out, and you can make the world a better place. And I mean that sincerely. I'm not smiling at all. But what's wrong with the way companies are engaging with candidates and the way, just give me 2 minutes on what nirvana for hiring looks like. If it were up to you and you could redo the system and put in place some sort of best practices, what does that look like?
You really want to get me started?
I do.
This all right. I am going to roll up my sleeves. I'm going to roll up my sleeves now, because we're going to get it on. Okay. I did a bunch of TikTok lives recently, done a bunch of shows, and people calling in saying, I applied to 7 companies, no one ever got back to me. I was 3rd round interviews, no one ever talked to me. Recruiting's lame. I go, no, it's not. It's not lame. The system's broken. The most important muscle any organization should build is the recruiting muscle, and it's the last one they build. It's the least they respect, and it's the most underfunded. And I understand why. There's all kinds of market dynamics that drive that. No recruiting volume is ever steady in most organizations. So every organization is reluctant to hire a full-time team, because there's ebbs and there's flows. There's times we need to hire 100 people before sales kickoff. There's times we don't need to hire people for a few months, or revenue dropped, we got to stop. So let's turn that off. So there's not a real business justification sometimes, to keep that staff full. So what does that mean? We let them go. Well, a lot of people getting hired and then let go makes a lot of people not want to do that profession because it's not steady. So we can't attract and keep great people unless they really love it, despite all the headwinds of why you have problems, because companies don't have steady needs. And I'm gonna share a story right now with you, which has really sort of frustrated me. And I don't mean to out LinkedIn for this, but I'm sitting at LinkedIn. Here we are, a company whose main product is passive recruiting, which is, we've got a great system for you to build your funnel. And I'm getting my teeth kicked in because we're growing, and I think I need more than I have so that I can get out in front of my pipeline growth. Okay. So I go to my boss and he goes, we don't need more recruiters. We don't have enough job openings right now. And I said, CEO of LinkedIn, Jeff, you do know the business that we're in is passive recruiting, right? You do know. So what I had to do is get my head of sales at LinkedIn to sell Jeff on the kind of business that we're in to get me more resources. And Jeff wasn't trying to be difficult. It wasn't that he wasn't bright. He's like, we can't afford that. I'm like, okay, well then I need hiring managers to step up more. That's what we need to do. But we're in this predicament where people have bad candidate experiences because companies are not willing to recognize that's the most important muscle you have. I tell this to candidates all the time. If you start looking for a job when you lost your job, it's too late. I tell hiring managers, if you start recruiting when someone quit, it's too late. You need to always have 3 or 4 moves ahead of people outside the organization so you're not caught with your knickers around your ankles when someone quits and you have a single point of failure. And you also should be moving people around. So we're in this really weird spot. The reason why TA isn't it's higher performing because great people don't have the patience to stick around because it's too cyclical and they get let go too often. And it's really you have to hustle. If you're really good, people will find you. And the great recruiters, they love what they do and they're sought after. No problem. There's a lot of really good ones, but a lot of people don't want to touch that because they're let go. It used to be L&D was let go. In a downturn, let all the training. We're not going to train people now because we got no money. So there's a lot of competing forces and headwinds that I think contribute to why we're here. Like when I see a company say, "Oh, we got a recruiting agency doing that," I go, "Why? What?" The most important thing you should be building is the capacity to learn to recruit really well because people are delivering your value. This gets me to another rant, which is I'll be sitting in front of, I was a last minute speaker fill-in for this 300 CEOs in the Bay Area a couple of years ago. And the headline act was Peter Goober, owner of the Warriors. He was going to talk and they had some, guru neuroscientist talking about the brain. Like, "Hey, Steve, can you do something on HR?" I was like, "Okay, sure." And I was like licking my chops, like I'm going to crush this, and I want to get better speaker reviews than the head of the Warriors. So I get up there and I say, "Let me ask you a question." And it's all CEOs of non-tech companies. So we're talking, medical, service workers, airlines, fashion. Okay. I said, "What's the number one way that you create value in all of your organizations?" And they go, "Oh, people." I said, "That's the number one way you create value?" Okay. So then should it be fair for me to expect that all the best systems you have are your people systems? Is that fair? Or did you invest more in your accounting systems and your sales tools? Yeah. Why? Oh, and why did your CFO buy the people system plugin for the accounting system that you bought? Doesn't make any sense to me. If people are creating value, and is that the number one thing you talk about in your staff meetings is the people issues? Or is it, "Hey, Steve, we're going to talk succession planning at the end of the meeting. Oh, we didn't get to it. Let's talk about it next quarter. Sorry." Because that's how it happens all the time. Like, I don't understand that. And it's like, yeah, people are number one. I am going to do a video in a few weeks, and I can't wait for it, where I'm going to sort of role play. "Oh, yeah, we're a great company to work for." Really? The first thing you talk about in every meeting? Nope. Do you care about the people that leave your company? Nope. Do you survey your employees once a year? Oh yeah. Well, then you're not surveying your employees because a once a year survey doesn't mean anything. You know what I'm saying? So that's why I feel like I've got a burning platform. That's why I'm excited to do what I do. It's like I feel the LinkedIn experience in my career has given me license to sort of punch some of this stuff in the face a little bit.
Amen.
And I feel great when I'm out there and people are saying, "Wow, those are really fresh ideas. Thank you for that." But it doesn't make sense. If
Well,
people are really the greatest value, shouldn't that be the first thing we talk about? Shouldn't those be the best systems? They're not.
and you're right, and we really need to pivot now. But we know this, but for those listeners, what Steve's saying is gospel. It's truth. It's so ironic. It's beyond ironic. It's clumsy. It is all about the people. It's the people. It's the people. But it's a stepchild. It's the last thing everything else is more important. But we say it's about the people, but then our behavior and our actions do not support that. You know it. I know it. We all know it. And that's a great segue to go to. And I'm real keen on this, Steve, because one of the primary reasons. By the way, if you still want to be at HR after listening to this, God bless you. I don't know how Steve still has a full head of hair. Let's just start there. Okay, so Steve, there's a lot of candidates out there that are having that experience you just described. They're getting discouraged. I liked how William said hacks, and then we don't need any tricks, but what are some good, you sent me this deck one time that you created on how to create personal brand from my LinkedIn profile to just my network. I mean, it was like it was gold. And you know what? Maybe I'll put it in the subscription thing below, or the link below, audience, if Steve lets us do that. But what practical advice, it's broken. You just did a great job of explaining it. So I'm new to the job market. Maybe I just graduated from college. Maybe I want to change jobs. COVID's hit. I've sent my stuff to everyone. No one's getting back to me. Talk to me.
Okay. I got a lot of thoughts on this one, and I'll try to be succinct. First thing I would say if you're looking for a job today is you need to think like a marathoner. This is not a sprint. This is a marathon. Now is not the time where the perfect jobs are plentiful. Now is the time to take an imperfect job, to wait it out to get to the perfect job. What I said earlier, I really mean. No job description that's out there, they really think they're going to hire 100% of those skills. Do not be intimidated by a job spec that you've got 40 or 50%. They could hire you. And you can demonstrate, I can learn in the next 10 or 20, or give me a mentor for a few months, I will crush it. So don't be intimidated by these overly worked, what we insiders call purple squirrel job descriptions, where you get it from a hiring manager like, I'd be happy to fill that for you in about 20 years. Do you want to wait that long? Okay, well then let's be realistic about what you're looking for. So and I say, if you don't have a job, your job is looking for a job. And that means 3 meetings a day and 5 names from each of those 3 meetings. Informational interviews. Don't beg, don't sound desperate. Just say, I want to let you know that I'm looking. These are things I'm really good at. What advice do you have for me? What would you do if you're in my position? Is there anyone else you'd recommend for me to talk to? If you are between the ages of 20 and 30, you really need to hustle. If you're between the ages of 30 and plus, you need to hit your network hard. CVs are really more relevant for people early in career than anyone else. Here's the other, I'm going to give you 3 things that most people don't know. One is, most recruiters in the company don't work for that company. They don't. They're contractors. In some cases, you're lucky. Even at LinkedIn, 60% of my recruiters at LinkedIn were independent contractors. I didn't want the world to know that. I didn't feel good about that. And I tried to fight. I didn't win the battle with the CFO and the CEO. That's number one. Those people are going to move. So even if you're frustrated with them because they're under-resourced and overworked, stay in touch with them. They may wind up in a place you want to be, even if they're not there now. That's number one. Number 2, job boards. Okay, those really are for people that don't have much of a network. And if a job's been up there 3 weeks, it's been filled. Don't waste your time. Okay, and if it's been up there more than 3 weeks, it's just a pipeline filler. So don't get frustrated. Hey, I haven't heard anything. Yeah, because it's just up there to generate volume if it's been up there a longer period of time. But the other one, the really important one, is the one I just mentioned, which is, don't think that everything in the job description is necessary for you to be able to be hired. If you got 60%, you got a good shot. 70%, you got a great shot. And so make sure it's not like the must-haves, like, if people are still uptight about college and you don't have it, well, show what you've been able to learn. Show that, like, I work with people who graduate from college and I crush those people, so don't be intimidated. But this really is playing the long game. And one thing I want to leave with people is, looking for a job if you don't have one should be no different than if you do have a job. You should be looking for a job right now, because no company is guaranteeing long-term employment. And I say, and this is one of the comments that I mentioned in my book, is I believe the future recruiting slogans are going to be something like this: come join my company because I'm going to help you leave it. I can't promise you a job forever, but I promise I'll make you better, so that even if you do lose this job, you're going to be better on the other side, right? And so we have to be more honest about what we're about. And I think it's more honest as a recruiter, and I mentioned this earlier, I care about you for your career, not just when you work for me.
I love it.
I call it the Tony Soprano School of HR. What? You quit, you're dead to me. You're dead. That just doesn't work today. I got Glassdoor, I got social media. You treat me like Dookie on the way out, I'm going to tell the world. Mm-hmm. And by the way, now you're not wanting me to come back and be a boomerang employee and work for you in the future. So this is, the whole system, recognize this is it's a numbers game. Those of you that have done online dating, it's a numbers game. It's like, no, yes. Oh, great. Finally got a yes.
That could go really off into an awkward tangent that we will avoid. Metaphor. But last question for me, Steve, is your interview fail, either personally through your career where you've just flopped, or you can make it anonymous where you've seen a flop.
My consistent flop is talking too much. Consistent.
Get out of here.
Too much. Yeah.
I don't believe that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Does it surprise you?
That's it? That's all you got?
Yeah,
so
that's it.
Here's the thing, and I've studied this, and it's really fascinating to me, is I've been in a few interviews where I was being interviewed, and about halfway through it, I realized the interviewer wants me to be their friend. They're not checking my skills. They're not asking me about me. How do I delicately grab the wheel, land some good points about me, not hurt their feelings that I don't want to hear about how nice they are and how great they are and what a great company it is. And that's really hard, but that happens a lot. You know, one of the things that the audience should know is a lot of managers don't know how to interview. So when you go in there, bring your, like I do this when I'm going on television. My sister used to be in PR and she taught me this is a great lesson, which is no matter what they ask you, say these 2 or 3 things. Whatever your points are, they're going to land, right? Whether it's a podcast like today, whether it's TV, like I want to make sure.
Bro, say it.
Right, right. So Beverly asked me a hard question. I didn't know where to go to it, but I knew what point I wanted to land. Okay, so boom. So that's what I would do is say, before I leave, I want to make sure. And there's one question that every interviewee needs to finish the interview with. Based on this interview, do you have any concerns about about making me an offer? Don't leave that room without you getting a chance to defend some hypothesis they have, which may not be true. Okay, so. But my flop, well, the biggest flop was the one I told you, William, where I connected with everyone that I interviewed with, and the whole universe found out, and I almost got fired from the.
That's a pretty good one. I was going to say. You ended mine.
Yeah. So another crazy interview story, and this isn't necessarily about a flop. I'm sitting in the lobby at LinkedIn, and the guy Arvind Rajan, who's now CEO of a company called Cricket, was the interim HR guy. He runs and grabs me and quick, you gotta leave. I'm like, what's going on? He goes, one of your coworkers at Electronic Arts is also interviewing for this, and we don't want you to see who it is. And we don't want that person to know. I'm just like, whoops.
Awkward.
Yeah, awkward. And then that guy later told me, I had a huge bike rack on my car, and he says, hey, I see you're interviewing over there because I saw your car in the parking lot. So that was a bit of a oopsie. You know how to do that. Another one, I completed an interview, William, and I went to the restroom after and realized, oh, looks like I won't need to be undoing my fly because it's been down for the entirety of the interview. Wonderful. Nice look.
Wait,
Yeah.
Okay, producer Bev may have a question, and I'm gonna while she formulates her thoughts. It's okay if you don't, but Steve. So we kind of close the show, every show with and you've already crushed it, so you don't have to say anything. But by the way, anytime I want, Steve and I talk, not often enough, but I call Steve when I want or need help with anything HR, or if I go, Steve, I'm talking to these guys. I need to sound really smart. Can you give me 3 talking points? Just what he said. It's like, he'll just, gosh, in between his first serve and his second serve, I'll be like, okay, dude, let me write that down. Hold on a second. So everything he's saying is spot on. But in HR, as you well know, you see and hear it all. And we love to close the show with some anecdotal thing that was like the most awkward. The fly thing was good, but you observed one guy, producer Bev and William, one guy's the parent showed up, not the applicant. And then we go, where's the applicant? Well, he doesn't interview very well. So we're going to do it for him. Or I know, right? One guy brought his mom. We've kind of heard everything, and it can be racy. That's one thing audience, if you can't already tell, Steve speaks the truth, whether it's pretty or nice or cool. It's true. And so I'm hoping you can give us some sort of salacious, doesn't have to be bathroom related.
All right, I'll give you one that's a little bit naughty, and then one that was a little bit like, oh my gosh, that didn't really happen, did it? So first job in recruiting at Esprit, we were hiring an outlet store, sales associate. And I hear the one line, which makes the hair stand. It didn't make it stand up in the back of my neck back then, but it does today. I love working with people. What the hell? What the hell does that mean? So I'm relatively new. I say, well, what do you mean? He goes, and this is, San Francisco. So do the math on this one. He leans over to me. He says, well, Steve, I would rather be in bed with an interesting person than an interesting book. Ooh. And it's a long eye contact. I'm like, okay, all right, thank you very much. So, but we hired the guy, by the way. We did hire the guy.
Got a good point. I mean, on some level.
I was like, Okay,
That's a good
real
one.
brutal honesty. Let's make sure he goes to the right sales associate training around how to relate with customers. Okay, so that was one. The other one was, not as risque, but I'm in the middle of an interview at LinkedIn, and my office was right next to Jeff Wiener's, and he would come by sometimes. He didn't care if I was in an interview or not. Like, hey, I need to, where's this or where's that, or what do you think of this? And the candidate, something's off. Like, they're not in their game. They're kind of like sweating a little bit, and I'm used to that. I'm like, is the sun in their eyes? Is it too hot in here? And finally I pause, say, are you okay? And he goes, oh, I really hit the car really hard in the parking lot when I was parking. And I go, oh, whereabouts? He goes, oh, right behind your office over here. I go, that car? You hit that car. At the very moment he's doing that, in comes Jeff. And he goes, hey, somebody hit my car.
That's fantastic. You can't
And
skip
he's
that.
pissed. He's pissed. And I go, well, Jeff, I'd like you to meet, Rishon over here. And the guy just wants to disappear. Like, no,
Wow.
that was the CEO's car.
Well, so what happened? You didn't tell Jeff in the moment?
Jeff felt horrible. No, we told him. Jeff felt horrible. I was like, oh my God, it's fine. It's fine. I got insurance. Are you okay? Is your car okay? Jeff's like, can I drive you home? Like, it was off the, Jeff was like so gracious. And that's just he was really intense guy. But that was really his character. And that, I don't remember what happened with that one. Let me tell you one last one, because this is one of the most epic stories of all time. At LinkedIn, when you would come into the lobby, we had a television that you would sit in. It was a globe rotating that the engineering team had built as sort of a hackathon or a hack day project. Every time a new member of LinkedIn signed up, the globe would pivot to the country. A little cartoon talk box came up and say, so you're like the business card cut out of a LinkedIn profile, like Maria Lena in the Ukraine, who's a UX designer, just signed up. And it was just okay, so it's doing that.
I think
so I pick up a candidate. This woman, I can't remember. I think it was like a data science role, and she sits down, and she's kind of silent. She goes, "Your site's under attack." I'm like, "What? What'd you say?" "Your site is under attack." I go, "How do you know?" She goes, "There are bot names showing up on that globe that are false names." And I'm thinking, well, maybe the guys are just testing it. So I was like, okay, hang on a second. I go down and talk to our head of operations, David Henke. Hey, is our site under attack right now? He goes, yeah, someone's hacking the site. She figured it out by sitting in our freaking lobby, looking at the globe, and like these weird names and locations. And she's like, there is a hacker. Now, I've told this story before, and someone said, plot twist, she hacked it.
Oh, nice.
That would have been a genius. That would have been a genius. I honestly don't remember. I don't remember. God, we should have. We probably should have hired her. But yeah, it's a great story, right?
On. And I'm so grateful, not just for you being on the show, but for all the help and support you've given me over there. So Steve, how people are going to want to get in touch with you, how can they reach you or find you in a way that's not going to be, too intrusive?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. I have a website, stevecadigan.com. If you're interested in some of the things we talked about, a lot of this stuff I get into a lot more depth in my book that's coming out, hopefully May, June timeframe. You can get on the mailing list. I'd love to do that. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, just mention you saw this podcast and I will accept your invitation. I don't take blind ones, but if you say, hey, I heard you or saw you speak, my whole model of I only connect with people I know sort of blew up when I left LinkedIn. So like, yeah, I can't do that anymore. So I use it more of like a networking tool and a sort of like a HubSpot list than necessarily like, oh, I really know this person. So, but I want to thank you guys. I mean, I know some of you to varying degrees. It's sort of like a little bit intimidating to be in front of like the Knights of the Round Table over here. You guys are very gracious to invite me to the table, and I hope that we could do this again sometime.
I do too. What are you doing tomorrow? No, but seriously, Steve, thank you so much for carving out this time. Audience, like and subscribe, follow Steve. If you can't already tell, he's just an amazing guy. Your passion and your ability just bring true. It's not.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. So until next time, thank you. Like and subscribe. Career Keynotes, and we'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for watching this episode of Career Keynotes. For more killer content, please like and subscribe to our channel. We welcome all comments and questions and are grateful for any input regarding future content, topics, and guests. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.